I want to ask you something, and I want you to actually sit with it before you react. When was the last time something really bad happened to you? Something that genuinely frightened you or hurt you or made you feel completely out of control? And the first thing that you reached for was God. Not a doctor, not a friend, not a plan of action, but God. Now, I'm not here to make you feel stupid for that. I'm here to ask a much more interesting question. Why does that happen? Because here's what we know about human beings. We are, at our core, meaning-making machines. It's not a flaw, but it's actually one of the most remarkable features that we have. When something happens to us, and especially something painful or random, something senseless, our brains immediately go to work. They start to build a story, and they start looking for a cause, a reason, a purpose. We cannot tolerate the idea that things just happen, that a child gets sick for no reason, that a good person suffers while a cruel one doesn't, that the universe is indifferent, not cruel, not kind, but just indifferent. That is almost unbearable to sit with. And so a very long time ago, we built something to make it bearable. We built God. Now, before you close this video, because I offended you, I want to be precise about what I'm saying here. I'm not saying that God was invented by simple con artists to control people. That's another conversation. I'm saying something quieter than that, something that I think is more honest. I'm saying that the psychological function of God, the reason the idea sticks, the reason it spreads, the reason it survives every scientific revolution and every cultural shift is that it works. As a coping mechanism, it just works. When you tell someone that their dead child is in a better place, that grief becomes more survivable. When you tell someone that their suffering has divine purpose, that suffering becomes meaningful. When you tell someone that a loving intelligence is watching over them, that the darkness isn't actually dark, and that there's a plan, that none of this is random. You have given them something extraordinarily powerful. You have given them control over the uncontrollable, or rather, that feeling of control. And that distinction is everything. There's a branch of psychology called terror management theory. It sounds dramatic, but the core idea is very simple. Human beings are the only animals that know that they're going to die. And that knowledge, that quiet, constant awareness of our own mortality produces a kind of background anxiety that shapes almost everything that we do, our relationships, our ambitions, our need to belong to something larger than ourselves. The research on this is fascinating. When people are reminded of their own mortality, even subtly, even briefly, they become more defensive of their worldview, more hostile to people who challenge their beliefs, more likely to seek out comfort in rituals and communities, in systems that promise continuity. In other words, when you remind people that they're going to die, they cling harder to God. That's not a coincidence. It's the mechanism. God is, among many other things, our species' most sophisticated answer to the problem of death. Not just what happens after, though that's part of it, but the deeper problem of meaning in the face of oblivion. If there is a God, then my death isn't the end of me. If there's a God, then my life meant something beyond what I can measure. If there is a God, then the people that I've lost are still somewhere, still real, still reachable in some form. These are not small things. These are the things that make life feel livable. And here's where I want to slow down, because I think this is where most atheist arguments get it completely wrong. They treat religious belief like it's just stupidity. Like people believe in God because they haven't read enough books, or because they weren't educated well enough, or because they're just weak-minded. That's not just wrong, but it can be condescending. And it misses the point entirely. People believe in God because human consciousness is genuinely difficult to bear. The randomness of suffering, the finality of death, the aching to feel that your existence matters, not just to the people around you, but to the universe itself. These are real problems, profound problems. And for most of humanity, religion wasn't just the best answer that we had. It was the only one we had. So I'm not mocking that. What I'm doing is naming it. Because here's where it gets complicated. A coping mechanism isn't automatically wrong. Coping mechanisms exist for a reason. They help us survive things that would otherwise destroy us. But coping mechanisms can also become cages. When the thing that helps you survive also prevents you from living, when it stops you from asking certain questions, or makes you afraid of certain answers, or turns your grief into gratitude before you've actually possessed it, then the medicine has become the disease. And religion, as a coping mechanism, has a very particular shadow side. It doesn't just help individuals cope with suffering. It helps institutions manage populations. When you tell a poor person that suffering is holy and that the meek shall inherit the earth, that poverty is a spiritual virtue, then you have given them a good way to cope with that exploitation that also happens to prevent them from questioning it. When you tell a grieving person that everything happens for a reason and that God has a plan, you have now given them a way to survive loss that also happens to prevent them from asking who is responsible for that loss. When you tell a child that their natural instincts are sinful, that the body they were born in is a source of shame, that their desires are evidence of corruption, you have given them a framework for making sense of their confusion that also happens to do profound psychological damage. The coping mechanism and the control mechanism are often the same mechanism. So, what do you do with that? If God is at least in significant part a response to pain, a story we tell ourselves to make the unbearable bearable, then taking it away isn't a liberation, not automatically, not for everyone. For some people, the honest answer to why does suffering exist is more comforting than it's part of God's plan. For others, it's devastating. But I'm not here to devastate anyone, but I am here to say this. There is another way to cope. You can sit with uncertainty. And it is hard. It is genuinely and profoundly hard. The universe does not care about you, and that is a terrifying thing to accept. But there is something on the other side of that terror that religion, by its nature, cannot give you. When you stop needing the universe to have a plan, and when you stop requiring a cosmic author to justify your existence, you become responsible for your own meaning fully, without a safety net. And that meaning, when you build it yourself out of love and attention and deliberate choice, it doesn't feel like a consolation prize. It feels like the real thing. God is a coping mechanism, one of the most elegant, most durable, most psychologically sophisticated coping mechanisms our species has ever produced. And like all coping mechanisms, it tells you something true about the pain that created it. We are fragile and temporary, and we are desperate to matter. Those things are real. The question is whether you want a story that makes it easier to ignore, or the harder, stranger, more alive experience of looking at it directly. Just think about it. If you made it this far, thanks for listening or watching or whatever. And hope it leaves some food for thought for some people. Anyways, I'll see you in the next one. Thanks.